In my last game update, I mentioned that we finally reached the early playtest phases for Project Bloom. This is the phase where we rapidly implement updates and changes to the game based on player feedback. Roughly every 4 to 6 weeks, I try to make a new build of the game available for a new group of players, then take their feedback and start cooking up a new build. While I've had 2 playtest groups since starting this process and received lots of feedback. Well, after scrubbing through all the data, there was one thing that I wanted to address first, and it was the lack of room variety in Project Bloom. One of the key elements of a decent roguelike is the variety of rooms you'll encounter along the run. These rooms create points of meaningful decision making for the players, and when done correctly, can really elevate the experience. While in Project Bloom, there weren't really many options for the players to choose from besides battles, shops, and treasure rooms. So I decided to finally add event rooms, which I call distortions. Distortions are basically rooms where players have a choice to make based on the scenario given to them. For example, you walk into a room and you find a beggar. Do you choose to help the beggar, ignore them, or make fun of them? And each option would ideally make an impactful result for the player. Helping the beggar could reward you, and ignoring him could just let you leave the room. But making fun of him could trigger a chain event. I'm hoping to have events that are triggered based on the decisions you made in a previous event. Maybe even have secret bosses tied to these decisions. However, adding that today is quite a bit of work, so I decided to add that for the future, but it's definitely in the idea book. So now that we know we have to make event rooms, it's time for the fun part. Bringing it all into the engine. I just need a UI menu that displays some text, has a few clickable buttons, and some rewards for the players to go on their merry way. This should be easy, right? In order for the system to work the way I wanted it to work, it had to check a few boxes. 1. The system needs to allow for player choice. So basically being able to choose an option and having an outcome based on that option. 2. The system needs to support item and unit selection. This is basically a feature that allows the player to select an item to sacrifice, for example, or maybe select a unit that they would like to participate in the event. Lastly, the system needs to be modular. I really enjoy modularity in systems. I like the ability to mix and match different options to get a new option. Having a modular system up front will give me the flexibility I need to make new distortions in the future. I started by sketching out the UI layout. Having a visual representation of the front end helps a lot when framing out the back end code. At first I tried making my own UI layout, but in the end I just looked at Slate Aspire and said, yeah, that works. At this stage, I just need the system to work, so I didn't want to get too caught up in UI design. With the UI layout decided, it was time to start coding. The rough idea of how I want distortion events to work is when a player enters a room, a random distortion is generated and passed into the distortion manager. The manager populates the UI panel with all the information, then the player receives the reward or consequence after pressing an option. On the surface, it's pretty simple, but here's where we run into our first problem. How do you tell the buttons what to do? Typically in a game, buttons do 1 or 2 things like close and open a menu. That type of functionality can be predefined onto the button itself, like hey, just close this menu. But these event buttons need to prompt different types of options like healing the player or rewarding a relic or starting a battle. So we need to solve that. We need a system for telling the buttons what to do. First, I started by creating a class called Distortion. This class contains all of the data that defines a distortion event. It has flavor text, some image, but most importantly, it has choices. Choices are a separate class that defines the player's options for that event. This class contains what kind of result pressing the button should have. I defined the choices by using some simple booleans or true-false checks. If the choice requires a unit to sacrifice a relic, I toggle require relic select. If it requires a unit to participate in the event, I toggle requires unit select. The system checks if one of these bools are toggled and sets the button's functionality. Lastly, the choice class contains information regarding the outcome, or the result of the event. Outcomes are basically the reward or penalty for the specific choice. It can be a new relic, some healing, a skill upgrade, and so on. Note that by making the outcome of an event separate from the choices the player makes, I'm able to create a pretty modular system. I can create a distortion event, tell it how many choices I'd like to have, then tell it the outcome or result of each choice. The distortion manager takes all this information and can uniquely tell each button what their job is. I also made it so that the choices can accept multiple outcomes, allowing me to combine different rewards. So if I want to reward the player with a new relic at the cost of some HP, those are just 2 separate outcomes I combine together. One for a relic and one for HP. Now, there's actually a lot that goes on behind the scenes to get all of this to work properly, like the outcome class being abstract. So each outcome needs to be defined in a separate script. Like an outcome that rewards healing is a separate script from an outcome that rewards a relic. I never know how deep to go into the technical side of the game, so if you're interested in knowing more of the deep and technical stuff about Project Bloom, please let me know in the comments below. Overall, the system turned out pretty modular and easy to use. There's some kinks and limitations, but for 3 days of work, it's pretty good. Over time, I'm hoping to add meaningful and impactful events that the players could look forward to. If you're interested in hearing how the first playtest went, you can check this video here where I break down my decision making and the learnings that I got from that experience. Or if you want to hear me joke about being a solo developer, you can watch this meme video here. And if you enjoyed this video today, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. Additionally, you can wishlist Project Bloom on Steam. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.